Hello everybody and welcome to another top 5 board gaming video. Today's topic is all about non-traditional combat in board games. So we have all seen a lot of games, namely skirmish games and things of that nature, where battle is very simple. You have 1 versus 1 and they blow each other up, like in Diplomacy. You have games like Game of Thrones, where yes, you can have support and all that kind of thing, but it comes down to a simple numbers game of whoever has more wins, stuff like that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go over some games that have a relatively non-traditional approach to how to resolve combat. It's something that makes it a little bit more interesting, spices things up a little bit, and in some cases doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so, as always, I do want to hear what you all have to say and what you all think. What are your favorite games that have not so much a traditional take on combat of simply adding together numbers and seeing who's bigger, or whatever else you think? Let me know anything and everything in the comments, because you know I love to hear it. But that said, we're going to dive right in with my number 5. At number 5, I've got Chem. This is on the list for a couple of interesting reasons. First and foremost, it's at the bottom of the list because it is a very simple play a card, have your tokens, add up the numbers, and see who wins. But it's unique and non-traditional in that the loser can be the only one who has troops left on the board. I have not seen any other games where that is possible, and essentially the reason that it happens is because of the difference between attack power and prowess and all of this kind of stuff, the different essentially stats that go in with this game, where you've got attack versus protection and all of this sort of thing, where you might have a ton of protection, and just because you had a little bit of attack, that it doesn't mean much, because you may have killed off your opponents, but they still win the spiritual battle, I guess, and therefore they're the winners. So it's just kind of goofy. And between that and the fact that it is relatively traditional in the sense of you play cards and all that sort of thing, it's low on the list, but it's still an interesting thing, and frankly, it's a great game, so Chem is my number 5. At number 4, I've got Shogun. This is a game that really epitomizes the idea of the randomness of battle, and the way it does that is through a tower. The game comes with a literal battle tower, that's what it's referred to as, and the idea is that whenever you have combat, you toss all of the cubes inside, and essentially whoever comes out first wins. That's it. And the idea is, of course, if you have more cubes than the other person, it's more likely that your cubes are going to come out first, but you might get lucky and your one little guy ends up doing it guerrilla warfare and taking the lead and doing all of that kind of stuff. Now, that said, this is still a wonderful game, just like Chem, in that in this case, it takes place during the Shogun period. You have actual known samurai and other people from the time period that you can play as and all of this sort of thing. It's just definitely a very unique take on how to resolve combat, in that hopefully you make it to the bottom of the tower first. It's essentially a race of the cubes, and hopefully your guys are faster. So it's just kind of weird and interesting in that sense, in that it's much less strategic than it could be, but regardless, it's still a good game. Shogun, my number 4. At number 3, I've got Dune. This is an interesting game that combines several different mechanics to make an overall pretty unique non-traditional combat styling overall. You do have a battle dial where you can determine how much you're attacking essentially. You also choose a leader character who's going to be attacking, and you're also picking a card. The cool thing about this is the cards, though. It's not the basic idea of this is how much additional attack I have or something like that, but rather these are treachery cards. As long as you're playing a leader, you can play a treachery card, and it can do very unique things like kill your opponent's leader or significantly reduce their capability to attack, or it may do nothing at all. You don't have to play a treachery card. It's not a requirement, but it just makes it so that there's some much better intrigue, and it's very Dune-ish for those of you who have read the books or seen well, whether it's the older or the newer movie. The newer one's at least a little bit better to understand, but that's beside the point. So regardless, Dune is nice because it takes several semi-traditional combat stylings, combines them together into a relatively non-traditional overall style, and that's what I really like about it, and I think it works very well both for the story as well as a game mechanic. Dune, my number 3. At number 2, I've got Rising Sun. This is a wonderfully well done territory control game that all in all has a relatively simple combat mechanic to it, but if you get some of the expansions, especially like where you have different Oni and things like that, different entities that you can summon to your side, then it really starts putting twists on how the combat functions. In addition, one of the best parts about the combat here is that you're able to take hostages in addition to sacrificing your own players so that you can effectively avoid having them being taken hostage, and it adds to your overall score and it adds to your ability to do more and more things. So it's really cool in that you have that brevity between, okay, I have a feeling I'm going to lose this, but I can still get something out of it. It's not simply that I'm going to have to try and retreat, it's that I can still do something, I can still get something even though I know I am going to lose. And that said, on the face of it, yes, you do have miniatures that are facing off against one another in general as a 1-to-1 style ratio, but when you add in the Oni, it changes things pretty drastically. And with the idea of being able to take hostages and try and release hostages, as well as paying additional money to hire mercenaries and all of this sort of stuff, it makes the overall experience much less traditional and much more chaotic, to the extent of, this is going to be cool, this is going to be fascinating, this is going to be really interesting. Rising Sun, my number 2. At number 1, I've got Doomtown Reloaded. This is a great Western themed game, which we don't see too much of, and it has a great non-traditional combat resolution that fits in perfectly with the theme, and that is poker hands. Literally, that is how you win or lose in most combat situations. The idea though is that you can potentially get better and better things, or have better odds at getting better poker hands depending on how well you build yourself up. But the fact that it does that and it has the Western theme with poker and all of this kind of thing, it just fits in so well thematically as well as mechanically that it just works on a lot of different levels. It's a ton of fun. It's a great game. I'm still rather disappointed that I don't own it yet. Maybe someday I will, but I have played it and it's a great game. It's a ton of fun. Doomtown Reloaded, my number 1. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 favorite games that have relatively non-traditional combat styling. So sometimes you just get bored of the whole like rawr, pow, 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 and just 1 versus 1 and they blow each other up and all of that kind of thing. You want something that's a little bit different, but at the same time, you also want to be able, to an extent, control what's going to happen and how the outcome is resolved. And so I think these games really epitomize how that works and what they can do and all of that sort of thing. But of course, I want to know what you all have to say. What are your favorite games that have some kind of a non-traditional combat route that's not simply, I have these guys plus this card, you have those guys plus that card, my number is bigger, so I win. You know, what are your favorites that don't necessarily do that or somehow put a twist on it? Let me know anything and everything in the comments, because you know I love to hear it all. That said, if you haven't done so already, as always, please take a look at my social media pages where you can interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really fun ways. But with that, thank you once again. I do hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.